welcome, folks. This is Charles Froman. My guest, Jeff Kanter, is unavailable this week, and we are the Freedom Hub Working Group weekly webinar, and we're excited to present independent journalism today. And before we do the introduction, if you want to view past videos, we have 3 platforms there: BitChute, Brighteon, and YouTube. If you want to get to our weekly email on Mondays, the registration link is there on top. And we are sponsored by the Freedom Hub. And the Freedom Hub is a place to gather liberty activists and entrepreneurial disruptors together. We were featured in Forbes for creating cash patience, combining what's called sharing and health savings accounts to make you into a cash payer. Just honoring our sponsor. And we're also embedded in the award-winning app for cash appointments, where you can control your records and get some good telemedicine in this time of COVID. And we do like to feature great leaders in liberty every week, because becoming a cash patient is part of that for healthcare. Remso is a social media coordinator at the Washington Times, the other paper in DC. I recall when it got started back in the 90s, when I was a Republican Capitol Hill staffer, and just loving the editorials every day, so I could, completely ignore the useless mainstream press, which really is just a propaganda organ for the government and its cronies. Remso has authored a couple books: "Stay Away from the Libertarians" and "How to Succeed in Politics and Other Forms of Devil Worship." I love that title, Remso. He is a contributor at the Foundation for Economic Education and Free the People. He's won some awards for his podcast and activism. And so that is our guest today.
Awesome. Well, Charles, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. I'm pretty sure I didn't know what Zoom was 3 to 4 months ago, and now it seems to almost be as important as my Gmail and all my social media accounts. I have to go ahead and touch up on every day. And for those of you that may not have heard, because Charles is a lot more technologically advanced when it comes to Zoom than I am, I now know how to use screen share. So that it's a remarkable skill now, and I'll be showing you a little bit of what we have to offer over at the Washington Times in a moment. Once again, I just want to say thank you all for having me. This is something that I've referred to as kind of like the media Olympics. If there was ever a time to go ahead and capitalize on, just absolutely insane stories that we would otherwise think, could never happen in a normal, and I'm putting that in air quotes, normal world, it's happening right now. I think it was NBC LA went ahead and reported that amidst the riots in Los Angeles, there was a man eating his 90-year-old dead grandmother. Apart from the murder hornets, which were supposed to come through the West Coast, we also have an asteroid hurling towards Earth thousands of miles away, the size of Redskin Stadium. And on top of that, I'm watching several of my peers and former co-workers in and around DC in the United States using tools such as Facebook Live and Periscope to go ahead and periscope what's going down with the riots and the protests throughout the country. To think that almost 6 months ago, the only thing we had to worry about was whether or not the president would be impeached. That almost seems like a lifetime ago. But if 2020 has offered us anything, it's an opportunity to constantly jump on board stories that we wouldn't otherwise think would ever become real. And that gives us a great amount of opportunity, but it also emphasizes the great amount of responsibility that we have as a paper, as journalists. It's sad when I speak to many other millennials like myself. I'm only 25 years old. It often gets very confusing for them, because when you go ahead and ask them, where do you get your news? Somebody here outside of Washington, D.C. in Fairfax County might say, maybe Vox, maybe Slate. If you ask somebody who's more conservative, they might say The Blaze or The Daily Wire. While all of those are institutions where people can go ahead and get a lot of insight as to what's going on. There often seems to be a great confusion between news and commentary. When I speak to many people who are much more senior to me, they've really kind of opted out of a lot of the online only outlets, a lot of the outlets that are jumping more into multimedia, whether it's through video or podcasting, which Daily Wire, I do want to credit, is quite remarkable when it comes to that, as well as the Blaze TV. Many of them are going to Fox News or to CNN. It's actually quite funny. MSNBC doesn't often get brought up, but the point I want to make is a lot of people are confusing information with entertainment, news with commentary. We're entering something which I don't think is new to what we're dealing with right now. It's certainly not new to what we've been dealing with the past 10 years. I think it's been almost a 20, 30-year predicament we've put ourselves in, where basically we've wanted to combine news and entertainment. It's infotainment. It's the constant breaking headlines. It's the constant talking heads fighting. It's constantly confusing reporting with commentary, and commentary with being an objective reporter. I went ahead and surveyed a group of college students almost a month ago at Liberty University, my alma mater, and a majority of them said that they like Sean Hannity. And then I asked them, what do you think Sean Hannity is? And they said he's a reporter. Well, I could probably go and individually try and get them to state what they think a reporter is. Oftentimes, what we've done right now is we've really confused who we're getting our information from, why we choose where we go to get our information, and how we go ahead and process it. Regardless of anyone's personal feelings about Sean Hannity, he's a opinion person. He's a commentator. When he has done stories, and he was one of the first major figures to go ahead and point out Susan Rice's abuse in terms of using her clearance as she was leaving the Obama administration. She still hung around with the Trump administration, just kind of running around the hallways of the State Department, I guess, grabbing information and accusing Michael Flynn of God knows what. Regardless as to whether or not you like Sean Hannity or you don't like Sean Hannity actually did his due diligence as a person with a sizable platform, and he did bring on people that went ahead and pointed out to Susan Rice, hey, you shouldn't really be doing that. That might potentially be illegal. And then within a matter of hours, there were airfields being bombed in Syria. It was something that we often forget about, and it's only now being brought up because of what recently went down with Mike Flynn. I'm saying this to bring up one very important point. It's that in an era of people constantly grabbing your attention, you're seeing pop-ups everywhere, you're constantly on your phone or your tablet or your computer. You have many people competing for your attention. And often when I speak to people and I ask them, what do you want to get from the news? They tell me one thing: I just want to get the news. And just a little bit more about me. I am the social media coordinator for the Washington Times. I've been here for about a year now. I'm specifically in the commentary section. So what I try and do is I try and work with our editors and our other contributors to go ahead and bring as much attention to the commentary section, as well as also working in my dual role as essentially trying to bring as many new people to interact with the Washington Times on social media as possible, which also helps our news team. It is kind of fun, while I am in the commentary section, I get to work a lot with our news team, but I am really that bridge, because ultimately what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build larger platforms. I'm trying to find new ways to communicate with people, to get their attention, and to ultimately pitch to them why they should be consuming more of the content from the Washington Times. And it's been remarkable. After college, I worked in politics for a little bit. I left that. What they say is when you don't succeed in politics, go to media. And if media does not work out, organized crime is always available. But, I worked as the DC correspondent for a few outlets based in California. They were all conservative outlets. I always came in terms of myself as, staging myself as an opinion journalist. I'm going to go and investigate a story, but ultimately I'm going to tell you my biases so you can really understand how I viewed things and ultimately try and come to your own determination for that. But working in and out of DC, I've gotten to see how other outlets work. Every place is different. I'm not going to say some places do it better or worse, but what I will say is that everyone does it differently, and that's something that a lot of people don't understand. They think there's just one monolithic way in which newsrooms operate. But the thing is this, the Washington Times has been and will always inherently be a paper, a local paper for Washingtonians. It wasn't actually until very recently where, many people who may have been more politically active may have known about us on the West Coast or throughout America's flyover country. Now we've become more of a national name, and that's given us many new opportunities to connect with people that we wouldn't have otherwise had. And I think it's because what they're doing is they're engaging with us and they're seeing more of who we are and they trust us. We have a very separate newsroom than we do our commentary section. I will say that certain outlets and certain media publications, oftentimes, the commentators and the reporters, they tend to get a little bit too close to each other. And that was one thing I noticed very early on working at the Times. Our reporters and our commentators very rarely, if ever, associate with each other. I know people that have been working in the commentary section of the Times and as well as the newsroom who may have been working there for like 10, 20 years, but it wasn't until recently when they happened to go grab a soda from the vending machine that they met each other for the first time. And it surprised me. I wondered how often this behavior had been around, and it was something that was firmly instituted in our founding. What we wanted to do was we wanted to show people real news as well as hard-hitting opinions. And oftentimes what you need to do is you need to let the reporters be reporters and you need to let the commentators be commentators. So I see there's some questions in the chat. Let me go ahead and see what's going on. Okay, nobody's doing anything there. So I got the notification. See, still learning these things. Anyway, it's one of those things that it was new to me, and I was somebody that was working as a freelancer for many different outlets. This is coming from somebody that's been living in Washington, D.C. for over a decade. I moved here as a teenager. And for me to finally see this, I realized if I'm noticing this behavior, that we have people that really only consume us for news, and we have people that really only consume us for commentary, I wonder why it's so different everywhere else. And ultimately it comes to this, is we're in a digital age like most of us probably never anticipated. I remember when the first iPhone came out. I still can't believe that I am older than the iPhone. It almost seems like it's forever. I also realized I'm older than YouTube. YouTube came out in 2005, 2006. It's remarkable when we think about this stuff. But what we've seen is that we've been having some incredible growth over just the last couple of years alone, in an environment where many people might be, more tech savvy than us, might be more on the edge of things than us. And we're just constantly being consistent with how we go ahead and put out our work. But ultimately what we've seen is that, when we go ahead and we work with the right people who are just doing good at their jobs, opportunities open up. And when I started at the Times, we had, platforms and accounts on various social media sites, primarily Facebook and Twitter. But the one thing that I did want to bring up was the fact that our Instagram page only had about 2,000 people. Instagram for news is not one of those things that many other outlets focus on, but it was one of those things where I realized we have to go ahead and engage a new generation of readers and viewers and listeners, and they're on Instagram. So now our Instagram page has grown over to 17,000 followers. In just the last 6 months, we're getting hundreds and thousands of page conversions. And it just came from, okay, we can expand. We're going to go ahead and have more opportunities to do things. We have people like me coming on. I can go ahead and focus on building these platforms and giving more of our people an audience, so that way they can go ahead and engage with our consumers. We've also been on the forefront of many other things, such as Parler. The Parler app is a center-right social media platform that's akin to that of Twitter. Our account in January had maybe 3 people for a week, and now it's at 45,000 people. We're getting thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who have opted out of other social media platforms. They're only on Parler, but now they're engaging with the Washington Times in a new way that's never been done before. So it's been a fantastic opportunity to really see how good actual reporting should be done how actual commentators can go ahead and take the stories and the facts and the reports, and they go ahead and give their experience and their expertise to go ahead and really give people additional insights, so that way they can go ahead, take their opinion, and form their own opinion with it. It's been absolutely remarkable. And the one thing that I will go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and share screen real fast. So if I'm screwing up on anything, Charles, please correct me. But let me see. I want to go ahead and do Google Chrome. Okay, see my email. Yeah, I mean, our page is as clean and simple as we can go, because we don't want people bombarded with too much. And the thing that we often see is that in terms of more conservative editorials, you really see a lot of the same voices being put out there. We're seeing a lot of, Ben Shapiro being mentioned in outlets outside of the Daily Wire over at, let's say, National Review and Fox. And, who else can I think of? Glenn Beck at the Blaze, he's on Fox pretty often. Dan Bongino can go wherever he wants. We often really see conservatives really jump around one or two figures, and those people tend to get a lot of the airtime. But what we do is we work with both a lot of the people that have laid a foundation for themselves in the fields of economics, foreign policy, civil liberties, gun rights, you name it. We have folks there that might not otherwise be the folks that are going ahead and throwing out the quick sound bites that you see on the news. And I mean, we have everyone just right here. We have a new piece that's out, U.S. needs strong trade agreements with East Asia to curb Chinese influence, by Adam Brandon from FreedomWorks. We have James C. Grants, who's a former contributor. He's been with us pretty often. John Lott, a gun rights advocate that most everybody knows. And then we have more libertarian-leaning writers such as Judge Andrew Napolitano. Down below, we have Tammy Bruce from Fox Nation. We have Tim Young. He's a Fox 5 contributor. He currently hosts a digital series that we started over a month ago called On the Road with Tim Young. And what Tim basically did was he rented a car because he's a DC urbanite, didn't own a car, so he rented a car, and he wanted to see what the rest of the country was dealing with in terms of coronavirus. So now it's taken a remarkable turn, and he's reporting from Minneapolis. So he's a regular columnist with us, giving more of a millennial perspective on things, but he's doing it in a way which he can combine both his conservative biases with, just straight reporting, telling you what he's seeing, and he's putting out some of the best content I'm seeing out there when I go ahead and look at a lot of our market competitors and other outlets throughout the country, as they're trying to figure out how do we go ahead and, not just jump on what other people are reporting, but how do we go ahead and get actual commentary that's not just echoing what everyone else is doing? How do we go ahead and produce good original content that people like? So our commentary section is really a hub for everybody in the center-right conservative sphere. And we have everyone from never Trumpers to members of the Trump administration. We have everyone from the Cato Institute to the Mises Institute. What I've tried to do specifically in the commentary section is let people know, we're an open platform that's constantly growing. If you have a well thought out case for something that you believe in, we want to go ahead and be your first choice. And for many people, it's become that. I've been able to help develop relations. Our other editors have been able to help, develop relations with many people in and outside of the Beltway. So really what we're trying to do is manifest ourselves into what we really do feel we are. We're not just a Washington paper for Washingtonians, but we'll always be that. We're also becoming America's paper because of this. And we have other, really growing personalities such as Cheryl Chumley, Charles, our opinion editor, Charles Hurt, as you often might see on the Five or Outnumbered. I'm trying to remember all the Fox shows. I mean, we're really getting our people out there to go ahead and provide good, consistent, conservative commentary. But the one thing I do want to, emphasize is we can be a very obvious conservative editorial without having that jump into our news, because the news should just be that. The news should be just that, just the facts. And we have reporters who worked for, left-wing causes, who worked for left-wing outlets. We have reporters who are just apolitical, as nonpartisan as you can imagine. We have reporters who are just really good reporters. They go and they find a story. They gather the facts. They put the pieces together. They show it to our editors. They clean it up, and then we put it out for the world, so that way they can go ahead and see what they want to see, the news. And as somebody that's primarily been in commentary, I can tell you that, it is refreshing to see that actual reporters who are just dedicated to the ethics of journalism doing their job, and it allows our commentators and other guest contributors to, use our platform to go ahead and connect with people about the issues that matter. So it's a constant evolution. I think during this time, what we've seen is that, people are hungry for real news and bold opinions. Just recently, I think it was mediaspot.com. They go ahead and, take care of all the inside baseball news in terms of who's outnumbering who's doing what within the world of media. They showed that now we're America's #2 right-leaning news site. We're right underneath Fox News. We just recently surpassed the Washington Examiner. And when you compare our traffic now to our traffic a year ago, it expanded 229%, because we saw great opportunities to expand. We jumped on that. We brought in a lot of other great people to join our team. And what we're doing is nothing really new. We're just doubling down on what we're good on and finding new opportunities to engage with people, because we have the news and commentary that America wants. They might just not have heard of us, or they might not have really known who we were. I can tell you on our Twitter account, on almost a daily basis, I have people tweeting at us telling me how they don't like the fake news Bezos-owned Washington Post, to which I politely reply, then you shouldn't have tagged @WashTimes on Twitter. So this has been a great experience for me now getting to see this. I thought the impeachment process was going to be one of the craziest things before the 2020 election. Now I'm dealing with all of this. I'm waiting for the zombies, the plague, and aliens to come down, and then maybe things will get more interesting. But that's about all I have to say. I see that some folks have their hands raised, so we can go ahead and start doing a Q&A from here. So if you have a question, go ahead and just raise your hand, and I will go ahead and see what I could do. Charles, I clicked participants.
Yeah, I'll take care of that. So I'm going to just give you a little break here. That was great. Before I unmute folks who have their hands raised, David, you're on deck, and folks, just click the raise hand icon. You'll see it around your Zoom control panel. Recently, speaking of social media, Remso, at LinkedIn, that's where I've seen Cheryl Chumley's editorials that have been fantastic. I've loved them, hitting hard on some of the COVID hysteria, connecting the dots. Where do you see, getting back to social media coordination, some of your strengths on that, comparing Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter? And before I answer, at Facebook, I've starred your main Washington Times page as one of my first things I see, but I kind of like Cheryl Chumley's hard-hitting editorials for the time we're in. It's just great pieces to share, and I've shared a lot of hers. How do you see sort of those different social media platforms being useful in more or less ways?
So to kind of jump on that, what we're seeing is a very interesting time, and I'm saying that implying both we're seeing a lot of good things come out of this period. We're also seeing a lot of really scary things. I do want to emphasize that, and this goes for businesses as well. This isn't just something that sticks to media. This goes for businesses as well. You have to know where your consumers are and how to speak to them. I can tell you that our current majority demographic on Instagram, for example, are people between the ages of 16 and 35, West Coast, most likely female. Then when we go to Facebook, it's pretty more evenly split in terms of, whether men and women are on, where are they coming from, their income brackets, things like that. And then Twitter, where we have a majority male audience between the ages of 18 to 40. So, what I do want to emphasize, just anybody getting into social media, it's that you got to know where your content is going to resonate best. People often say that the Instagram account, which I'm really the only person touching that, the Instagram account has a different personality than, let's say, the Facebook accounts. And on Instagram, we just have @WatchTimes. It contains all of our content: news, sports, commentary, local news, some of our digital projects, such as On the Road with Tim Young. And then on Facebook, we have the multiple accounts. So then you can just go and see just commentary at Washington Times Opinion, which I'm the main manager for. And then if you want to see just local news, you can go to Washington Times Local. So what we're able to do is really segregate out specifically the content and the topics that people want. And that's something that is sometimes a bit hard to do because algorithms change, people's interests change. I can tell you, Charles, on almost a daily basis, I hear from somebody, hey, I just realized I haven't seen a Washington Times piece in a week, even though I like your page and I follow all your other pages. They don't do what you did and understand that, you have to set this up as a priority. So that way, when you log on Facebook, you will always see the most recent Washington Times content. And when it comes to Twitter, I mean, oftentimes it is rather interesting to see which stories do better and which don't. We can go ahead and discuss the giant elephant in the room. It's what Twitter did to President Trump's tweet last week regarding, oh my gosh, it's already been a week. It feels like a million years. Wow, this is depressing. Anyway, they went ahead and added a fact check bumper to the bottom of his tweet that said, oh, do you want to get more facts on this? And then they added some of their own sources and they said, oh, we're not saying he's wrong. But when you put a fact check on somebody's statement or what have you, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, anywhere, what you're basically saying is you have a problem with what's being done. And that had never been done on Twitter before. On Facebook is notorious for doing that with their third-party fact checkers. And the one thing I do want to state about Facebook is that, in 2016, when I was at the Media Research Center, one of the things that happened was, a lot of conservative thought leaders and prominent figures went to go meet with Mark Zuckerberg about what actually is trending news and whether or not there's a liberal bias. And what Mark Zuckerberg did, which I think is neither good or bad, though I think it's what we've seen as a net negative result in terms of how people feel when they're online, especially voicing political opinions, is that he went ahead and replaced the human manned news curation team with algorithms. And the one thing that I do want to point out is that algorithms, just like Isaac Asimov said about robots, are simply different reflections of ourselves. There's something that other coders and tech entrepreneurs and engineers have stated is, I'm going to butcher it probably, but it was algorithmic bias, that the algorithm's always going to reflect the intentions and the motives of whoever is creating the algorithm. So now we live in the age where Facebook doesn't think you're going to engage with something, you're not going to see it. If they don't want you to engage with something, they might go ahead and limit the impressions. Apps like Parler don't do that. Parler, there are no algorithms, there's no tracking, there's no selling your data. You have a choice to go to Parler if you want to. But, this is what we've had to figure out. What works for us, what doesn't? What content works better on other places? How do we leverage that so that way we're giving people what they want as well as providing them the things they might not know they want? At the end of the day, we're giving people a product, which is news and commentary. Sometimes it's not just spoon feeding you the type of content you want, but also showing you things that you might not know you want yet, or you might not have an opinion on. And social media makes this the great equalizer in a way, because we have an opportunity to do that, connect directly with our consumers. It's both a challenge and it's also something that we're able to do because of the opportunities and the tools provided. But overall, I think, and this is just my opinion, I just want to really label this. There's a Remso Martinez opinion. I think what's going to happen is we're going to have a larger discussion over whether or not some social media platforms are really platforms where anyone can say what they want as long as it's within the confines of the law and you have the right to free speech, and whether or not a platform has really become more of an editorial, meaning you can say what you want until they say you can't say it. We're seeing this with Twitter right now. And ultimately, that's what the president's executive order last week really stated. I think it comes with some negatives. I also think it comes with some positives. But ultimately, this wouldn't have happened if Twitter didn't throw the fact check on there. Whether or not you agree with the president's statement, the real question should be whether or not you agree with whether a platform has the right to say you're right or wrong about something. And if Twitter, and I'm just using Twitter as an example, I'm not picking on them too much. I actually have a pretty favorable opinion of Twitter. Ultimately, it's coming down to this. Is Twitter an editorial? If so, you have the right to sue an editorial. You cannot sue a platform for certain things. So if they want to go ahead and throw fact checks on something, Twitter has the right to do that, but they don't have the right to say they're one thing and behave like another. And that will impact everybody. That's going to affect everybody from the music industry to the news industry, to small business, to big business, to somebody's, Trump loving grandmother, to somebody's, Joe Biden loving HRC fanatic leftist aunt in Georgetown. It's going to affect everybody. And that's the thing that we're paying attention to quite closely, because ultimately we have to be able to engage, overcome, and adapt to a constantly changing industry. And people might think that there's nothing new under the sun of social media, but I want to just emphasize that my job did not exist before I came here. There was a social media editor, but now we have a social media team. I'm the social media coordinator. We have the social media editor. We have our media coordinator who also manages a lot of the news accounts. And then we work with a digital marketing team. And then we work with our editors. Now we've become more of the point where everything has to cross through us at some point. And it's exciting in many ways. I mean, most of these apps, platforms, companies, they're not even a decade old. It's crazy seeing this. So hopefully I didn't get too long-winded and I hit the main points of your question, Charles.
No, I'll have a follow-up to that in a second. Dave, why don't you ask your question?
Remso, this is David Demarest in Omaha. I'm with Roads to Freedom Foundation. Are you familiar with the term mission reporting? And this is back from the Frank Reynolds and early Dan Rather days. It's a mixture of reporting and commentator approach. I found it offensive in the terms of yellow journalism back then. Of course, it had a progressive slant to it. And how does that apply to the Washington Times as compared to the Epoch Times?
I will be quite, so I first want to thank you for your question, David. This is something that a lot of people don't know. It's that you have a lot of individuals out there that their whole goal in terms of owning or managing a media outlet is not to do journalism, but to essentially do public relations. I think it was one of my role models, Hunter S. Thompson, who said, if your news and your reporting isn't offending everyone on both sides, you're not doing that. You're just doing PR for the people you like. And we see that now so more than ever. I was an editorial assistant and I started doing social media back in 2017 at the American Conservative. And, the one thing that, I want to preface is that the American Conservative is a product of the American Ideas Institute. It's a nonprofit. The American Conservative is primarily commentary. They only really do commentary. And the whole thing is managed essentially in a trust. There's no corporate interest. If one person wants to change things, they have to go ahead and fight with an entire board. Other than that, the editors, the managing editors, and Kelly Vallejos was my mentor over there. She's been a great resource for me over the years as I've tried to really understand how things work in DC. Ultimately, they allow a lot of editorial freedom. That example is just commentary. Now, when we look at organizations such as the Epoch Times, for example, I'm not 100% sure about their ownership, but from what I gather, and please correct me if I'm wrong, they're in a similar situation to the Washington Times. It was founded by a group of people that established a trust and essentially said, we're going to go ahead and make sure there's no outside corporate interest or single special interest coming in to manipulate what we want actual reporters and actual commentators to do. And what you're going to see is a lot less of the shenanigans that you see with other outlets. One of the biggest complaints, and I have heard this from folks, I will just go ahead and address it head on. There were a lot of people, both conservative and liberal, commentators and reporters, who had a problem when Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. I mean, I get kind of nervous sometimes because I don't really want to go head on with some of our other competitors in certain fields, but I often don't really see the Washington Post as a competitor because for many years they've been losing the interest of a lot of their consumers. They had really rubbed a lot of their longtime supporters the wrong way. And then when Jeff Bezos came in, you saw a giant shift in how they reported things. You saw a giant shift in their opinions of certain things, such as visa expansion programs to go ahead and allow for cheaper labor, the certain expansion or decrease of certain labor laws that are more favorable to Amazon, less reporting on what Amazon and other big tech are doing in China. And a lot of people notice that really fast. The thing about us, and I'll extend it to the Epoch Times, is that when you go ahead and you just say we're going to go ahead and provide the finances and the resources and the ability for you to go ahead and do actual journalism, actual reporting, actual commentary, it gives people the one thing that they might not get at certain outlets, and that is honesty. Where our news team is. Our news team is just a news team. They only do reporting. And then our commentary section at our discretion is conservative. Where our opinions stand on things. But I know people who only consume Washington Times commentary, and they never look at our news, not because they have anything against our news, but because they just choose not to. They can go to their local news outlet if they want to. And I know people who are flaming liberals who love our reporting, who never read our commentary because they disagree with our commentary, and that's fine. If you want one or the other, we've got both. And if you want both, we're your best platform for it. So I think the one thing that we're seeing as we expand our readership, as we develop new relations with new customers and new readers, is this: we are the Washington Times, and we work really for you. And that's what we want to constantly remember. We don't need to change your opinion. That's not our job. Our job is to go ahead and provide you with what you're looking for: real news and bold commentary.
Very nice. While I recognize Kishore for a question, before you ask it, Kishore, if Jane Dolan or Abigail Noble want to think of a question on the fairness of health coverage, health freedom issues, I could go to you next if you want to discuss that, because that's definitely part of the COVID narrative. Kishore, go ahead.
Yeah, so you pointed to the Epoch Times, which I find intriguing. I want to learn more about it. They seem to have a different flavor. They're definitely conservative, but they seem to be positioning themselves for conservatives among minorities, and they have some unique items like interview of thought leaders and so on. Their content has grown rapidly. So I want to ask you, what impact do you feel that Epoch Times is having in this segment of the newspaper industry? How is it able to grow so fast? And is that positioning effective?
So, sir, I want to go ahead and thank you for your question. I'll be, honest with you. I don't really pay much attention to them, and it's not to slight them. I'm not saying that passive aggressively. I just know this, that when I have seen them at functions like CPAC and other events throughout Washington, D.C., it's very refreshing to see another outlet, especially an outlet that's been able to grow. And their strength is this: good marketing, good digital content. You can read their stuff, you can see their stuff, and you can listen to their stuff. And they utilized really the great equalizer, which is social media. So that right there is really what I've been able to gather from them. And I think they will only continue to expand, because what we're seeing is a lot of people, for my parents' generation, it was just CBS, and then it was CNN. And now, if you're somebody within the 18 to 30 age group, you've got so much variety. so much variety, and you don't need to have a TV network. You don't even have to have a newspaper. You can have different combinations of both, as long as you're really utilizing the greatest worst tool, or the worst best tool ever, depending on your opinion of it, the internet, to go ahead and connect with people. And when I see outlets like them pop up, even when I see our cousin, the Washington Examiner, even when I see them out there, getting, viral news and stuff, ultimately my thing is this: if you're providing people what they want, and sometimes what they want is just more confirmation bias, sometimes what they want is to actually get to the objective, real reporting of the story, there's a market for it. Oftentimes, and we've seen this in the Trump administration era, I think he has hit many points on the head, and this is just a me opinion. I think what he's really shown people is that a lot of the tired and I'm trying to find a polite way to say it. A lot of the outlets where it used to be, oh, if they say something, it's like gospel truth. You have the right to question it, and ultimately, if you opt out of them, it doesn't mean that other places are less reputable. It doesn't mean that other places are less able to produce good content. Ultimately, as somebody that's a free market person, I like to see competition. I like that. That makes everybody better. Good competition, it's like a tide that raises all boats. And when we look at outlets like the Epoch Times, there are going to be things that people have in terms of negative criticisms. There are going to be things such as positive criticisms. But ultimately, it's up to all of us in the media to go ahead and ultimately do our job best. Give people news and make it news and call it news and let people know it's news, and give people commentary and label it as commentary and let them know it's an opinion and nothing more than an opinion. If we can just keep doing our jobs, ultimately that's going to do better. I do say that, for certain people in the cable network world, they do get upset when they see that a piece from the Washington Times is getting more visibility than the piece they did on the same topic from a different view from their outlet. And they get upset when they see the Epoch Times rising. Why are they doing better and why are we not? Well, ultimately it's either good timing, good placement, or maybe people just want that. I think that competition is good. I think that competition is good for media. And I also want to state, I have friends at the Washington Post. I have friends at Fox News. I have friends at the Washington Examiner. And I got to meet the folks from the Epoch Times in February at CPAC. And, I just want us all to be on the same page. Let's do good journalism. And as long as we're doing that, ultimately our customers will go ahead and decide where they want to go. But here's the other beautiful thing about it. And if I'm long-winded, I apologize. This is the most interaction I've gotten most this week. So it's great to talk to new people. But, I've never met anybody that's just firm. I only watch Fox News, or I only read the Washington Post, or I only read this. I go to Burger King. It doesn't mean I don't like McDonald's. Ultimately, people want options. They want to be able to go and compare things. They want, they're in a mood for one thing one day and something else completely different. I think ultimately, it's our jobs to go ahead and give people what they want. Do they want more podcasts? Do they want more digital content? Do they want more exclusive content on one platform? Give the people what they want. Be good at your job. Do it ethically. And ultimately, let the free market decide. Thank you.
Yeah, good answer, Remso. Before I call on Jane to ask a question, which I think will be about health coverage, Roger Ailes at Fox told Robert F. Kennedy that their media and a lot of news media depends on pharmaceutical companies buying of their advertising revenue. And because of that, these news outlets feel limited on their freedom of speech to discuss big issues, which is partly why I like Cheryl Chumley's Washington Times editorial so much. She really connects the dots and hits hard on what's going on. And as we face more restrictions or medical mandates or martial law, what have you, I'll let Jane ask a question, but if you can mix in an answer for me. how important is it to have outlets like yours that aren't so reliant on corporate buys of your advertising revenue? But before you answer, Jane, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Well, I just want to say, Remso, this is so refreshing to hear somebody who's 25 and just so vibrant and, doing what you're doing. I think it's incredible.
Thank you.
Really amazing. But one of the things I was wondering is, who do you have as far as like your health panel? Who do you go to answer the health questions that give varied opinions? Because as far as I'm concerned, in the COVID coverage, it feels like we're just getting one side over and over and over again.
Just to clarify, are you talking about just the media environment as a whole, or are you talking about the Washington Times?
I'm talking about the Washington Times. Like, how do you, as an organization, who do you confer with to find different opinions? Do you have people on your advisory board? Do you have somebody who's on task or team there that you go to?
Okay. Yeah, gotcha. So I'm gonna break this down twofold. Talk about the ability to act independently in order to accomplish our mission and our goals for our customers, as well as where do we go ahead and reach out to certain people to make sure that we're giving folks, we're giving readers across the country the best insights and facts and opinions in terms of situations such like the COVID-19 crisis, which has been really one of those defining moments in media, as well as social media, as a social media professional, seeing how we tolerate different opinions on a very sensitive topic and how we're willing to tolerate each other's ability to have the freedom to come to our own conclusions on something. So I do want to preface for Charles' first question, we do accept advertisers. We have people advertising in the paper, we have people advertising in the website, so we do have that. And in terms of what we're getting from our benefactors and everything else, we are actually a profitable paper. And that's something that a lot of news outlets don't get to say. We actually make a profit off of the newspaper. We actually make a profit on everything we do. So we're in a very lucky position where what we've been able to show is that we have a product that is so good, we're actually not just making our minimums or asking for more money from somebody else, but we're actually making a profit. And that was something that really surprised me, because coming primarily from digital, digital media over to a hybrid structure, which is both, podcasts, a website, and the newspaper, to see that we're actually making money off of what we're doing is important. But at the same time, we have the right to say no to clients, and we have the right to go ahead and say, you know what, we're good with who we have right now. We're not willing to take just a large amount of money, especially if it means that we have to change our opinion. And it's not simply because of the fact that we are in a trust. It's also the fact that we're so consistent in the quality of what we're doing. We have something which many businesses, which many outlets wish they had, but they don't obtain. And, entrepreneurs can see this, people in media can see this. It's that when you have a committed base of readers and people who are subscribers that trust you, and people go to you for the facts, and people go to you for honest opinions about something, you're only beholden to the readers. And that is something where I believe that other outlets have somewhat forgot. That they feel like they're talking at the consumers, they're talking at the readers, instead of engaging with them in a way that they know what they're getting from us. So that's incredibly important. That's why we'll never have to really worry about somebody just completely blowing all of our other people out of the water, and one day we're saying this is good and this is bad. It's something that we're able to do. Now for your question specifically, I just want to remind you again, I'm the social media coordinator, so I don't have as much insight into the exact process as to how our newsroom and how our editorial team work. But I will say that, we allow people who believe that everything from COVID was hoaxed to COVID is absolutely real, to wear a mask, to not wear a mask. Most of the time they approach us in the editorial section. I see a lot more of what's coming in from the editorial section. So I see that. And ultimately, as long as they're not putting out stuff that is just egregiously false, we allow them the platform to do so. That's the purpose of an op-ed. That's the purpose of the commentary section, to allow people to have those vigorous discussions about the things they believe. In terms of how our newsroom operates, I mean, we have we have different editors. We have editors for sports, national security, politics, health, and all those editors have their own resources which they provide to their reporters. But if you're a good reporter, you also go ahead and expand your own connections with people. Sen Wu Tan is our health reporter at the Washington Times, and she speaks to everyone from local doctors to the CDC. And she goes ahead and investigates the stories as is, giving you both insights and statements from everyone who's important in terms of, the health of the nation. And she goes ahead and states that. The one problem that I do see in a lot of places is that they either don't link their sources, they don't state their sources, or worse, they go ahead and put up these unquestionable anonymous sources. So ultimately, our editorial team, our newsroom, the beautiful thing about it is that they work separately. They work in a way that one focuses just on news, just on giving you the facts, and then the other provides you a great array of people who have done their homework, are usually professionals in their field, and they're using our platform as an opportunity to speak to the public. So it's the beautiful thing. It all works in harmony in a way. And, I've never heard of a giant, backlash against something that we've published because, somebody in the newsroom didn't like it. We all know our place. My place as the social media coordinator is not to have an opinion on the opinion stuff, and certainly not to have an opinion on the news. It's to go ahead and say, hey, how do I take the information I'm getting and I put it out in people, in ways that people are communicating with each other, so that way they can determine whether or not they want to trust us enough to hear us out. So, during this COVID-19 crisis, and we brought this up earlier in discussing whether or not social media platforms are really free and fair platforms where everyone has skin in the game and everyone has freedom of speech, or are they going to be a publisher? If you want to be, an editorial, a publisher, if you want to do that, if you want to go ahead and fact check everything, you have the right to do that. If you don't, you also have the right to do that. But ultimately, it's not the job of these platforms to determine whether or not you can or cannot watch documentary. I can tell you that one of the many things that a lot of our readers wanted to hear about, and I know that Cheryl Chumley wrote many, remarkable op-eds about this in her column, is that, whether or not you agreed with the premise of pandemic, you should have the right to see it. I mean, when Twitter and Facebook were taking it down, what it did was it martyred it. What it did was it said, if you thought COVID was one thing, you're going to definitely believe it now. Or if it wasn't one thing, you're going to definitely not believe it now. Ultimately, is it the job of a social media company or a big corporation to tell you what you can and cannot view? That's scary. And that's coming from the private sector, not government. It's coming from the private sector. So ultimately, where does that put the onus on us? If we don't do our job, if we don't go ahead and, do the reporting and actually give good opinion analysis based off what we've been able to gather from the information, that's going to be a very dark day for things. But ultimately, I think during this COVID-19 crisis, we've been able to grow remarkably more so than other outlets because we're three things. We're consistent. We're hungry to constantly do our jobs well, irregardless of the circumstances and the environment. And we don't take our readers and consumers' trust for granted. As long as we're those three things, we're going to be fine.
Great answer. Abigail, you have the floor.
Okay. Well, you did a wonderful job of answering one of my questions about fake news. I've followed health policy with a state level focus for freedom for the past 10 years. And I thought I had a pretty good eye for what fake news was until COVID came along. Oh my word. Especially with the chloroquine thing. I wonder if I could ask you an opinion. Have you seen the article from Science debunking the big Lancet worldwide study that associated heart problems and deaths with chloroquine usage?
I don't know much about it, honestly. This is one of those things where I realized it got political real fast, and that I wasn't going to be able to take enough time as I probably should as a private citizen to understand it. I do know that we've definitely done enough reporting on it, and we've definitely done enough commentary on it. Where the overall consensus in the commentary section is, I don't quite know. I think we've been pretty down the middle on it. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of the op-eds we were getting, it wasn't even necessarily about whether it's effective or not. It's whether or not we were allowed to like it if we're a left-wing person because the president likes it. And that's how dangerous and that's how bad our public discourse has become. I will say that it became incredibly polarizing when we had to constantly understand, what do we call this virus? Do we call it COVID-19? Do we call it the Wuhan virus? Do we call it coronavirus? Do we call it whatever? Because it got to the point where it was less about what do we call it technically, what is it really? What's the actual name of it? It has to have a name. And then you can't call it one thing because it's offensive to the Chinese, or you can't call it one thing because it's racist. And that's what happened. Instead, with other outlets, instead of discussing what it was and how dangerous of a threat it was, it became what we can't call it. And the fact that I was in the news analysis division at the Media Research Center. You all know it as Newsbusters. And one of my favorite projects, and this changed my outlook on everything, it's the Media Research Center's Newsbusters, Bias by the Numbers. And I still, I think Curtis Hawk, the editor at Newsbusters, is still doing this pretty much daily, but they go ahead and give you a breakdown of the topics discussed and the amount of time they discussed it. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, you should go check out these numbers for yourself. When you have some cable outlets that are talking more about whether or not the name of the virus is offensive versus whether or not hydrochloroquine is going to be effective, that's not a good situation. And all that does is create more division. It only pushes people more into their own designated political camps. And ultimately, we're all lesser off because of it. So
I agree. And weren't you guys the ones that published on how politicized the mask has become?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we wrote. I'm pretty sure we wrote an editorial about it. But I mean, Charles Hurt, our opinion editor, I know he's commented on it. The mask itself, I think this is a consensus within the commentary section. The mask itself became less about preventing the spread of the virus, and it became more of a political virtue signal. And a lot of other more conservative outlets got rather upset about that. Yeah. I mean, it was funny when I see, other right of center people that were like, you can't talk about that. And it's like, watch us, because we're going to do it. But
mask is only good if it says MAGA on it.
I've got a Spider-Man mask, so I went a different route.
Oh, no, as a lifelong nurse, I just found it absolutely appalling how many right-wing people were pulling up all these scientific research studies that showed how much or how little a disposable mask filtered viruses. I'm like, it's really not about that.
I mean, if anything, to play devil's advocate, that's a worthwhile discussion. We should have a rigorous debate over that.
Except as a nurse, as a former surgery nurse, I can tell you, you don't wear a disposable surgical mask in surgery to filter anything. It's a guard, it's a barrier. It catches globules of spit and globs of blood that are coming from the other direction.
Absolutely. I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying, but what I'm basically saying is, we could have a discussion about that, and, people like you can provide the answer pretty fast. That's a discussion. Whether or not calling it the Wuhan virus, and whether or not we're going to cancel you if you call it such, or coronavirus because it's hurting Corona beer, my favorite beer. That's not something that should be talked about all day, all night. And when you have people like Chris Cuomo, who calls himself a reporter, that's an editorial opinion. That's an editorial opinion. That's not a news fact. That's an editorial opinion. And it seems like for the past couple months, you just had a lot of people telling the public what you can and cannot call it, instead of discussing whether or not treatments with drugs such as hydrochloroquine are actually useful.
Do you have any thoughts about what's all entering into this besides the fact that it's a presidential election year? I mean, something's driving all this cross narrative, and it seems really out there beyond even presidential election year.
My favorite book is Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, 1972, by Hunter S. Thompson. It's a collection of his works when he was covering the Democratic primaries leading into the 1972 election between George McGovern and Richard Nixon. And Rolling Stone is a left-leaning outlet. Hunter Thompson was a very progressive liberal. But the one thing that he said was, you can go ahead and get 7 reporters in a room, and if all they care about is the story, you're going to go ahead and get 7 different, vastly contrasting opinions. I don't think this is new to us. I just think we're more cognizant of it now than ever before because there's so much competition for it. I see it less of certain entities going after one side or one person. And I see it more as, people trying to achieve absolute market domination, which I don't think is really possible in media necessarily. It's not like people can ultimately choose whether or not they want Coke or Pepsi. What we see is that, majority of Americans in recent surveys like Coke more, but when you actually ask them what they buy, they like Pepsi more. That is a situation where if we just all stop drinking Coke, we could all drink Pepsi, and it's really doing nothing to any of us other than limiting competition. What we're dealing with right now is worldview confirmation bias, and really what people want. And that's what makes our job so much harder, because we have a room of really hardworking reporters and we have a separate room of very hardworking commentators and contributors, and we don't confuse the two. So I think we're just more aware of it now because of the very connected world we live in and the times we live in. I think that this is as, old as mankind itself. We're just talking about it in a very different way because of the context. So I think we'll have this problem years from now. I don't think it's a partisan issue, a political issue, or even an issue of opinion. I think it's a human problem.
So Remso, tell us how we can reach you. And this has been really fantastic.
Thank you, Charles. Everyone, it's been an absolute pleasure answering your questions. You can find me on LinkedIn at Remso W. Martinez. Follow me on Twitter at HeyRemso. But for all of our content, please go ahead and go straight to the source. You can download our app on the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. I'm confusing all my words. Just the Washington Times app, so that way you can get the notifications and all your favorite stuff just to your phone. Or visit us at WashingtonTimes.com. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest even. I love Pinterest. It's where I get all my favorite recipes on things. And even the Parler app, where we just primarily have our Washington Times opinion section. But you know how Al Gore's amazing internet works. I trust you to find us. But at the end of the day, WashingtonTimes.com is the best place to go.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Remso.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you.